If you get exposed to publicity, you're more likely to render a judgment of guilt.
It's time to put your foot down and say, okay, the way you've been doing it isn't working. I'm not going to risk my daughter's life over, you guys playing little games of not cross-examining and not doing the extra mile.
A bombshell ruling in the Bryan Kohberger case. The judge not only deciding the case will be moved out of Moscow, Idaho, but also the judge indicating he wants off the case altogether. I'll break it down and get reaction from one of the victims' families in this special NewsNation and Law&Crime collaboration of Entin Across America. Hey everybody, this is Brian. I'm actually doing this podcast from the airport. Sorry if it's a little noisy. There's some background music playing, but I wanted to get this on with the developments with Idaho. I was actually in Idaho recently. Now I'm flying out. I'm going to Pennsylvania. I've been working on an Ellen Greenberg story. If you don't know that one, you can go back and see I did a podcast on that. I'll have developments on that case soon. But I wanted to go over the latest developments with Idaho because there's a significant development when it comes to the change of venue. The judge in Idaho, in Moscow, Idaho, Judge is his name, has granted the change of venue. So the Bryan Kohberger trial will be leaving Moscow, Idaho. We'll be going somewhere else in the state. Where exactly, we don't know. I want to read part of Judge's ruling. It says, considering the undisputed evidence presented by the defense, the extreme nature of the news coverage in this case, and the smaller population in Latah County, the defense has met the rather low standard of demonstrating a reasonable likelihood that prejudicial news coverage will compromise a fair trial in Latah County. Thus, the court will grant Kohberger's motion to change venue for presumed prejudice. And in the judge's order, he goes over the reasons for his decision. He talks about the defense witnesses. You remember they had this big hearing where the defense argued for a change of venue. He talks about the witnesses who testified that media coverage was spread out across Latah County, that many of the potential jurors that were surveyed via telephone knew about the case. He also talks about just how small the jury pool is in Moscow, Idaho. You know, it's a small college town. And what was interesting is much of his decision based on his filing was because of how small the police departments and law enforcement agencies and court personnel agencies are in Moscow, Idaho. He talked a lot about how the sheriff's department is a small department, which I've seen. I mean, every time you go to the hearings in Moscow, Idaho, and I've been to most of them, it's the same sheriff's deputies. There's just a handful of them that control the courtroom. It's a small courtroom. It's a very, very small courthouse. Again, it's a small sheriff's department. It's a small police department, Moscow Police Department, and the court clerk's office is very, very small. So he said that they just wouldn't be able to handle it in a small county like Latah County. He made reference that, if there was another big law enforcement event, God forbid, a mass shooting or a major car wreck or something like that, that they would be spread just too thin with a trial of this magnitude also happening in Moscow. So that seemed to really play into his reasoning, and now the trial will be moved. What's interesting, and I want to read you the last part of his ruling, he said, Kohberger's motion to change venue is granted pursuant to Idaho Criminal Rule 21A and 21B, consistent with the language of Idaho Criminal Rule 21C 2B. This court orders a transfer of venue without specifying the new place of venue and refers the case to the administrative director of the courts for assignment by the Supreme Court to a court of proper venue in another judicial district and assignment of a specific judge to preside in the criminal proceeding. Now, that part, I know it sounds kind of wordy, but I'll explain it to you. That part really surprised me. I mean, I was sort of expecting that there would be a change of venue, but what he's saying there is that he also is getting off of the case. So Judge will no longer be presiding over the Bryan Kohberger case, and it will now be up to the Supreme Court to decide not only where the case moves, but also who the judge is. So we're going to see a whole new judge, and we're going to see a whole new location. Where that is, we don't know. Could it be one of the counties near Moscow, Idaho, one of the surrounding counties around Latah County? That's possible. Could also be Ada County, which is about 5 hours or so from Moscow. That's Boise, Idaho. which would in some ways make sense and solve some of the problems that the judge talked about in his motion. It's a big county, it's a big courthouse. It's where Lori Vallow's trial was, you might remember, a big judicial complex. They've got big courtrooms, they've got plenty of courtroom personnel, they've got a secret underground entrance for jurors and for defendants. So that could be a possibility that the case does end up getting moved to Boise. We're just gonna have to wait and see on the timeline. But the Supreme Court hopefully won't make a decision soon because there's all sorts of deadlines coming up that Judge had set. Whether those deadlines will stick, we don't know, because now there's going to be a new judge and a new venue. I spoke to Kaylee Goncalves. She's, of course, one of the victims. I spoke to her family about this decision. I was in the studio last night and spoke to them. Take a look. Let me start with you, Steve and Christy. What was your reaction to this ruling from the judge that there will be a change of venue, and then also that he is no longer going to be on the case?
So I actually heard those separately. They didn't come together for me. Somehow I got that the venue was going to be changed, but no location had been decided, or that the Supreme Court would be deciding that. So that was a little like, okay, disappointed. And then shortly after I heard about the judge. So I was on the phone with Steve saying, have you talked to Shannon? And he's like, I just got off the phone with Shannon now, so I'll call you back. So, they kind of had a discussion with Olivia and Steve and Shannon, and then he kind of called me back, and I was kind of losing my mind a bit, like, oh my gosh, this is it, this is the end, we're losing control. But he kind of, after he got me in on their discussion, I think that it's all for the best, and there's a silver lining. I think, getting rid of, we still don't know what county, so that still could be Nez Perce, could possibly be Kootenai County. And I think that I think the judge was in over his head, and I think getting a judge in that's way more decisive with a heavier hand and ready to hit the ground running might be exactly what we need. Hopefully, it doesn't delay things, and we could just go.
Steve, were you, I was reading through your statement. I mean, have you been frustrated with the prosecution? Because I was at the last hearing when they had the change of venue hearing, and, it does seem like the prosecution doesn't always push back a lot on some of these, defense witnesses and defense arguments.
Yeah, we are a family of action. We are get-her-dones, put the foot down to the metal and go. We went and hired Shannon. Thank God we have legal counsel, because if there's ever been a case where you need somebody that you trust and somebody you can work with, it's been him. Any family that goes through some tragedy like this, I highly recommend you find somebody that you trust, that really knows the ins and outs of that courtroom. So we hit the ground first, and we said, you got to be more aggressive. You guys have to be more aggressive. And they pushed back at us. And here we are, two months away from 2 years, and they're resetting. So we were right. We told them they needed to be a little more aggressive, maybe a lot more aggressive, somewhere in the middle. And here we are today, and we were right. But we can course correct. We can get this fixed. We can get the right guy in the right chair, and we can go from there. And I totally have belief in the Idaho Supreme Court. I know that they're going to pick somebody that they trust, somebody that they're already going to be well known about his cases and his work history. So everything that he puts down, it's not going to be questioned, because they're not going to pick somebody with questionable past. So that'll be the best.
Do you know, Shannon, like I was looking over some of the deadlines in the case, like I think there's a November 7th deadline, a hearing for the death penalty issue that came, the defense fighting the death penalty. Like, so will it be a whole new judge now in a whole new courtroom for everything moving forward?
Well, I mean, as soon as they change the venue, like they pick the selection, they tell us what county it's going to be in. I'm assuming that assignment will include a judge who will be presiding over the case. Obviously, all of the current decisions that have been made on the case, he can either stick with or go back. Normally, they stick with the decisions that have been made, and then anything moving forward. So all of these motions that have been filed regarding the death penalty and some of the other aggravating factors, those will be decisions that this judge makes on the case. And so, we're hopeful that will be either in Kootenai County or Nez Perce. because they're closer locations, and there's competent judges that can handle these types of cases and just get this thing going. So.
And I know how hard it is, Christy and Steve, when you guys have to go to the hearings and kind of get like the lay of the land there and get to know the people. And I'm just thinking like you will have to, I guess, sort of reacclimate to a whole new process
Hmm.
in terms of, the way you see Kohberger and where you sit. I mean, you've kind of gotten a little bit used to where you're at, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're prepared for that. We were just talking about that earlier. We'll have to kind of retouch with this community, whatever community it is, and get to know this community as well. And hopefully we have the support and the love that we do from Latah County, which I don't see why we wouldn't. And just depend on that community to support us. And like you said, learn the lay of the land in the courtroom. And, that will take a bit. But hopefully he'll be in orange next time we see him. And he won't be in his fancy suit anymore.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
they made such a big deal, Steve, of having him in the suit. I think the assumption was because it was going to be in that community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, there was a strategy that we were somewhat made aware of, no promises or anything along those lines, but there was a strategy. We didn't necessarily agree with it, but you trust, you put your trust in the people that have been in that room. And then when it just backfires, it's time to like put your foot down and say, okay, the way you've been doing it isn't working. I'm not going to risk my daughter's life over, you guys playing little games of not cross-examining and not doing the extra mile. If the other side's going to be working till the very end, till an hour left of the courtroom, then you know what? You talk until the end and then we do it again. We don't give up. We don't quit. We don't take the easy way road out. And I kind of felt like we were being out hustled sometimes. And, that needs to end, especially once we get to trial time.
Were you surprised, Shannon, that the judge wants off the case? Like, I guess, I don't know. I felt like he was kind of invested, like when I went to the hearings. Maybe I had the wrong, perception.
I think I was more surprised by the things that were mentioned in the order, how, deficient Latah County was in handling this type of case. And, a list of all of the things, the court clerks, the staff, the security, all the expenses, the privacy, the rooms that could be provided for the defense and the prosecution. And I was more surprised at that and how strong of a basis he used that in his order to grant the motion to change venue. And, these aren't issues that just happened yesterday. They've existed since the beginning of this case. And so I was surprised that was really a strong basis for the change of venue, was the deficiencies in Latah County, that he thought that it could not handle a case of this size and this type of publicity. And I think the family feels like if that was his belief from the beginning, well, we should have jumped off the horse a lot earlier, and got this going in a direction that's not as delay oriented. So
there are also those issues that you talk about that he talked so much about in the ruling are not really issues that came up much at the hearing. Like
Nope.
that wasn't a big part of the argument, but then it was a big part of his ruling.
Well, and the other thing Steve and Christy and I have talked about it is the missed opportunities for the cross-examine of the witnesses. A judge has to base his decisions on what's presented in front of him. And if you only present one side, that's what he has to believe. If I say that, that over there is a green chair and everybody sees that it's a purple chair, but I've shown that it's a green chair, and I don't come say, no, it's a purple chair, right? Then, they end up, the judge has to go with what they had an expert. He said it was a green chair. I guess it's a green chair, right? So, there was a lot of missed opportunities, I think the family felt like throughout this case, not just the change of venue motions, but any expert witnesses that have been presented in this case. The cross-examination, the family feels, has been pretty slim to none. So,
and just my last question, Christy, I mean, you're such a strong family. And there's been so many twists and turns like that I don't think anyone really expected along the way. I mean, how do you guys manage to hold it together so well?
Oh boy, it's not easy, but I've got him and the rest of the kids and our moms, and we all hash it out together. We all cry together, and just and we've got Shannon to get on the phone, big group calls, and figure it out, and we always try to find the silver lining. And like, this isn't the end, this isn't the end of the road, this is not over. This isn't a, because I take it to heart, like, that's a win for them, and it's like tick for tack. But other people in the family have different mentality than that. And they say, Mom, you gotta look at the bigger picture. You can't, it's not tick for tack, it's not tick for tack. And sometimes I'm kind of simple-minded like that, but I got to talk to the kids, and they grounded me and bring me back down, and Steve does, and Shannon does, and I just got to keep talking to them and listening to them and have them help me out.
A reminder that there was DNA evidence found on the sleeve underneath the leg. That good luck with that. Let's bring it on. Don't be scared of this. I mean, it's the pinnacle of evidence. Nothing is stronger than DNA. It's 100% science-based. And, we've got, 5 billion, reasons to think that we have the right guy. So let's go. Let's stop delaying, stop playing games, get the right person, and let's get this going.
So you can imagine the frustration that the Goncalveses have. It's been a delayed process, and now on top of that, change of venue, which they did not want because they wanted it to remain in Moscow. Now they'll have to uproot to a new community for the trial, which is expected to be 3 months long. And if it's Boise, that's really going to be quite a bit of ways for them and for other family members. But they seemed positive overall, especially about the fact that it'll be a new judge. They haven't been pleased with the judge. They feel like he's delayed the process. And it was interesting in that conversation, they also said they haven't necessarily been pleased with the prosecution, which is something that I could kind of sense in the courtroom. So, obviously our heart always goes out to the families. I always try to keep them at the forefront. I was in Moscow for the change of venue hearing when both sides made their case. As you heard from the Goncalves, the prosecutors didn't really make much of a case, but the defense argued hard for this change of venue. I want to show you this. While I was in Moscow, I went over to the site of where the murders happened, the house at 1122 King Road. You see there's no house anymore. It was torn down. There was an agreement made with the university that owned the house that it would be torn down, but it was just strange being out there because it's starting to grow in. It almost just doesn't even feel like the house was there anymore. And I had seen it before since it being torn down, but I don't know, there was something about this time, I guess just the fact that it's summer and that the grass is starting to grow in and starting to just feel like, an empty lot at this point. I also went over to the Healing Garden, a memorial for the victims. This is new. This is a new area on campus at the University of Idaho that was actually designed by students, where they can go to remember the 4 victims, and there's a nameplate for each victim, and there's actually an area where you can write messages on paper and leave them there. So it's nice that students now have a place on campus to go and remember the 4 victims, because it really was such a tragedy. I always try to remember, even with all these court movements and we're covering all the ins and outs, it really is about the victims and what their families are going through too right now. So we'll keep you posted. Going to be interesting to see how quickly the Supreme Court makes a decision when it comes to the change of venue, where it's going to be. We'll be following it very closely, and we'll let you know. All right, see you guys. I'm about to get on this flight.